In this video, I'm going to show you how I make sourdough sandwich bread. While you can certainly mix the dough by hand, I will be using this Nutimill Artiste mixer. These techniques will also work with the Bosch mixers as well. Here are the ingredients you're going to need. 425 grams of all-purpose flour. Of course, you can substitute some whole wheat in there if you want. 200 grams of warm water. You may need a little bit more if it's a little too dry, but start with 200. 200 grams of sourdough starter. I've made this with as little as 100 grams. 5 grams of sugar, 5 grams of salt, and 7 grams of melted butter. 5 of the grams of melted butter will actually go into the recipe, and 2 or whatever's left over will go on the top when we stick it in the oven. Okay, let's get started. I start by adding 200 grams of the warm water to my mixing bowl. Five grams of sugar. And 5 grams of salt. I add my 5 grams of melted butter. Give it a good mix. The butter is used to control the density of the bread. The more butter, the denser the bread. Once the sugar, salt, and butter have been mixed, I add my 200 grams of sourdough starter. There's a little bit of leeway here, so if you're not exactly at 200, that'll be okay. Again, these are all mixed together. In another bowl, I weigh out 425 grams of all-purpose flour. If you're a little over or under, that'll be okay. I add the flour to my mixer. I then add the starter mixture to the mixer as well. I start the mixer. Here I'm starting on slow speed. I think the Bosch mixer started a little bit faster speed. If it does not want to mix, then try increasing the speed. If you continue to have problems getting it to mix, then that's when you may need to add just a little bit of water. Only add about a tablespoon at a time. Once the dough starts to form into a single mass, we're going to add the lid to the mixer and let it rest for about 30 minutes. This will allow the flour to fully bring all that water and starter into the mix. After 30 minutes, we're going to start the mixer again. And what we really are looking for here is for the, the, the blades or the tines to fold that dough about 12 times. Once the dough has been folded about 12 times, go ahead and let it rest for another 15 minutes. We're then going to fold the dough again, essentially repeating the process. And let it rest again for 15 minutes. Fold it again. And rest for 15 minutes. Essentially, we're doing this 3 times. At this point, after we've rested, we're going to open up take the lid off the mixer, and we're going to do the window pane test. See if we can see any light through the dough without it tearing. This one's not ready, so we'll go ahead and fold and rest again. After the rest, we go ahead and check or perform the window pane test again. And this time, it's ready. With some flour sprinkled onto my mat, I remove the dough from my mixer and place it on my mat. A little bit of flour on your hands helps here. This time I actually do one set of folds by hand. I form the dough into a ball. And then I'm going to add it to a flour dusted bowl. It needs to be a bowl with a lid so we don't lose any of the moisture as we're proofing. I place the dough into my proofer. It's set at 86 degrees and I'll let it proof for about 2 hours. If you don't have a proofer or an oven that provides that feature, you can proof it at, let's say, 70 degrees and it'll take about 4 hours. So the colder it is, the longer it's going to take to proof. The longer the sourdough proofs, the more sour it will taste. Some folks even proof in their fridge to really draw out that proofing time. I'm looking for the dough to rise about twice its mass. It doesn't have to be that much. It all depends on how active your starter is. We're just basically looking for some activity. After my bread's done proofing, I dust off my mat again, making sure I get some on my hands. I then scrape my dough onto my mat. I'm going to perform the final shaping, and I start by folding the dough into thirds. I then start to roll it, trying to get it as tight as I can, because what we're trying to do is get some tension on the outside just by pulling it around. And the more we do this, the tighter it gets. I go ahead and start pulling sides of the dough over, just pulling it over. So again, what I'm doing is trying to put tension on the opposite side. Kind of think of it as forming a hot dog bun. I'm going to create a seam on one side and a stretch on the other side. And I just kind of keep doing this. There are a lot of techniques to do this, but for my sandwich bread, I found this works pretty good for me. You can do it more than once. You can literally keep doing it. I do it a couple times. I take the dough and place the seam side down into a greased pan. I'm using a cast iron pan here. Other pans will work as well. I've even used some silicone ones. I take a tea towel that's been dampened with warm water and place it on top. This will keep the moisture in as in this final proof. I then place it into my proofer for another 2 hours. Same thing applies to this proofing process as before. The longer it proofs, the more sour your bread will be. When it's done proofing, your bread should be a little higher than the top of your pan. First thing we got to do is we've got to score the bread. With sandwich bread, this can be a little optional, but it does help as the bread rises to keep things under a little bit of control anyway. I then take the rest of my melted butter and brush it onto the top of the bread. I place the bread into a preheated oven at 400 degrees and let her cook for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I remove the bread from the oven and place it on a cooling rack. It needs to cool for about an hour because the bread is actually still cooking. After the bread cools, slice and enjoy. But remember, if you like your bread a little denser, then add a little more butter. If you want a little more open crumb, then use less butter. Be sure to visit breadandammo.com for more information on this and other projects I'm working on. Until next time.